March 24, 1945. Combat Information Center, USS Bush, northwest of Okinawa. The glowing greenish sweep of the SG surface search radar showed ghost-like echoes on the dark screen. Radar operator second class James Patterson adjusted the game control as another sweep refreshed the display. Multiple contacts bearing 340 degrees, range 62 miles, estimated 50-plus aircraft coming in from Kyushu. Commander Roland Westholm picked up the TBS radio handset. Task Force 58 had set up 16 radar picket stations around Okinawa. These stations made an electronic fence that no Japanese plane could get through without being seen. What nobody knew was that this technology would start the most desperate and determined air attack in naval history. The Imperial Japanese Navy's Kamikaze special attack units had trained for one reason: break through American defenses and trade their lives for enemy warships. The radar picket destroyers would be their first targets. They would cut through the pickets, and the invasion fleet at Okinawa would be exposed. The math of the sacrifice had replaced normal naval strategy. One pilot, one plane, one ship. The Pacific War had turned American destroyers from submarine hunters into electronic sentinels. Each radar picket station was set 15 to 95 miles from Point Bolo, the reference point on Okinawa's Zemper-Misaki Peninsula. 7 stations were ready by April 1st. 9 more were turned on as the campaign went on. The USS Laffey moved through Pacific waves at 15 knots. Her Allen M. Sumner-class hull pushed aside 2,200 tons of seawater. Commander Frederick Julian Becton stood in the Combat Information Center watching the radar repeater scope. His ship had 336 men and a lot of anti-aircraft weapons built to destroy incoming planes. 6 5-inch dual-purpose guns in twin mounts, 12 40mm Bofors in 2 quad and 2 twin mounts, 11 20mm Oerlikon cannons, and all over the ship the newest fire control radars that would make naval history. The Mark 37 gun director with Mark 25 fire control radar in the Combat Information Center showed American technology at its best, at its most advanced. Unlike the simple radar rooms of 1942, the Combat Information Center, CIC, combined many radar systems into one complete tactical display. Air search radar could see more than 60 miles away. Surface search radar could see up to 15 miles. Height-finding equipment could tell how high planes were flying. Fighter direction circuits connected the destroyer to combat air patrols above. The math was new and powerful. Normal visual gunnery hit less than 2% of moving planes. Radar-guided fire control increased accuracy to 20% in the best conditions. When used with proximity-fused shells that exploded near targets without needing a direct hit, the defensive firepower grew even more. Lieutenant Howell Charing commanded Landing Craft Support Large 51, one of the gunboats helping the radar pickets. His opinion was clear and correct. The destroyers were bait, purposely placed to draw enemy attacks away from the main fleet. Draw the kamikazes to the pickets, bring in fighter coverage, and destroy them before they could reach the carriers and transports. At the training base at Kenish Airfield, Lieutenant Yukioki went over his attack plans. Orders went to the pilots of the 2001st Air Group. Operation Kikusui No. 1, Floating Chrysanthemums. 355 kamikaze planes and 341 regular bombers would strike the American fleet in coordinated waves. The youngest pilot was 17 years old. 7 days of training taught him to fly in formation and tell ship types apart. 2 days of takeoff practice, 2 days of formation flying, 3 days of approaching and attacking a target. Navigation training was very little. Escorts would guide them to the target area. Combat maneuvering did not matter. Their mission required only the ability to aim and dive. Vice Admiral Takajiro Onishi had formed the first official kamikaze unit in October 1944. Lieutenant Yukioki had led the first successful attack, sinking USS St. Lo on October 25, 1944. Transforming suicide attacks from spontaneous acts into a planned strategy. The pilots knew American radar skills better than most Japanese commanders did. The destroyers placed around Okinawa were not just early warning stations. They also controlled fighter planes that could meet attacking groups 50 miles from the fleet. But the radar pickets had a big weakness. Working alone 30 to 60 miles from other ships, they could not bring together strong defensive fire. A strong mass attack could overwhelm single destroyers before help got there. The math of the Toko was simple and brutal. If 1 in 6 kamikaze planes hit their targets, the exchange rate helped Japan. 1 pilot and 1 old plane for hundreds of American sailors and a $1 million warship. The American ships formed their defensive line as dawn came on April 6, 1945. Each picket station kept a 5,000-yard patrol radius. A destroyer at the center, 2 to 4 support craft in a diamond shape, speed 15 knots, course reversed every 30 minutes to make submarine targeting harder. The new radar systems turned naval war into an electronic battlefield. SC-2 air search radar swept the skies every 4 seconds. SG surface search kept watching the ocean. Mark 12 and Mark 22 fire control radars locked on to single targets for precise gunnery. SP height-finding radar worked out plane heights for fighter interception. Combat air patrols kept constant watch, but the distances were huge. 2 F-6H Hellcats were F-4U Corsairs per station during daylight hours. Response time from the carriers to the outer picket stations, 20 to 30 minutes in the best conditions. Those minutes would decide if ships survived. At 300 on April 6th, radar operators all along the picket line saw the first wave of Kikusui No. 1, multiple raids coming from the northwest. The tactical plot showed over 100 contacts closing on the radar picket stations. Fighter Direction Officer Lieutenant Frank Adams vectored his cap to intercept. 2 Corsairs against 30-plus kamikazes. The math was impossible. The kamikaze formation had already started their dive toward wavetop height, using the radar horizon to hide their final approach. On Destroyer Bush at Radar Picket Station No. 1, the CIC team tracked incoming raids from many directions. Raid 1, 40 aircraft bearing 340. Raid 2, more than 20 bearing 015. Raid 3, composition unknown, bearing 285. Commander Westholm had trained his gun crews for this moment. Keep tracking assigned targets. Fire when planes reach 12,000 yards no matter the aim. Keep firing as fast as possible until the target is destroyed or passes overhead. No stopping. For ID, anything coming toward the picket line was hostile. The Bush's ordeal started at 1500. After shooting down 2 planes, a Nakajima B-6N torpedo bomber got through the defensive fire. The kamikaze hit. Between the 2 stacks on the starboard side, its bomb exploded in the forward engine room. Steam shot through broken lines. 14 men died instantly, but Bush stayed afloat. Damage control teams fought fires while gunners kept shooting at incoming planes. At 1700, destroyer Colhoun moved to help Bush, bringing 4 cap fighters. What happened next was total aerial chaos. 40 to 50 Japanese planes swarming over the 2 destroyers. Colhoun took her first hit at 1730, a Zero crashing into the main deck. 3 more kamikazes hit in quick succession. Commander George Wilson ordered abandon ship as Colhoun broke apart and sank. 35 of her crew were lost. Bush kept fighting despite heavy damage. At 1725, a second kamikaze crashed into her port side between the stacks. The explosion almost cut the ship in 2. At 1745, a third kamikaze hit the port side above the main deck. Ammunition started exploding, fire spread out of control. At 1830, Bush rolled over and sank. 87 of her 307-man crew died, including members of Commander James Willis's staff, who had been aboard as Commander Destroyer Division 48. The survivors spent up to 10 hours in the water before rescue. LCSL-64 was first on scene at 2130, pulling exhausted men from oil-covered waters while still under threat of more air attacks. The math of April 6th was staggering. In one day, kamikazes sank destroyers Bush, Colhoun, and Emmons, plus destroyer Minesweeper. Emmons and 2 ammunition ships were destroyed and 10 other ships were damaged. But the radar pickets had done their job. The main fleet at Hagushi anchorage stayed mostly safe. The destroyers had taken the full fury meant for the invasion force. USS Laffey arrived at Radar Picket Station No. 1 on April 15, 1945, relieving destroyer J. William D. Commander Becton studied the tactical situation with his department heads. The Japanese had changed tactics after the first attacks. Small groups moved in at dawn and dusk. Individual planes used clouds and rain to hide. Coordinated attacks came from many directions to overwhelm the fire control systems. The Laffey had survived kamikaze attacks at Lingayen Gulf and Iwo Jima, but Okinawa was different. The close distance to Japanese airfields on Kyushu and Formosa meant constant attacks, no breaks, no safe times. At 8 a.m., CIC reported multiple raids closing in on Station 1. Estimated 50 aircraft in separate groups. CAP was engaging but heavily outnumbered. What followed was 80 minutes of the most intense combat in destroyer history. 22 kamikaze planes would attack Laffey, sometimes alone and sometimes in groups. The first 8 were destroyed by extremely accurate gunfire. The gun crews had developed a rhythm: track approaching planes, focus fire from multiple mounts, keep firing non-stop no matter if hits were seen, switch to a new target as soon as one went down. No celebration, no pause. The next plane was always just seconds away. At 8:27, the 9th kamikaze broke through the defensive fire. A Yokosuka D-4Y Judy approached from the stern where fewer guns could reach. Even after taking multiple 40mm and 20mm hits, the plane hit gun mount 53, the after 5-inch mount. The explosion killed 6 men instantly, including the mount captain, gunner's mate First Class Lawrence Dowski, who had been directing the mount in local control. Fires broke out across the fantail. Ammunition began cooking off. Mount 53 was destroyed, cutting out 16 of Laffey's heavy firepower. The 10th kamikaze hit minutes later. Another Judy, attacking from the port quarter, crashed into the after deck house, destroying 2 20mm mounts and their crews. Fire spread toward the after magazine. Damage control teams fought desperately to contain the flames. While gunners kept firing at new attackers, the 11th plane, a Val, dropped a bomb that hit between the stacks, went through the machine shop, and exploded. The blast broke steam lines and cut electrical power. Half the gun mounts, 42 and 43, lost power and had to be operated manually. Rate of fire dropped sharply. At 0900, Laffey faced her most desperate moment. 4 kamikazes attacked at the same time from different directions. The overwhelmed fire control system could track only 2. The first, a Val, crashed into mount. The second hit the port side near the waterline. The third dropped a bomb that exploded in the after engine room. The fourth was destroyed 100 yards from the ship by desperate close-range fire from a 20mm mount, whose gunner, Seaman Arafat Rides, stayed at his position despite shrapnel wounds. Laffey was burning from bridge to stern. Her rudder jammed hard left, forcing the ship into a continuous circle. Speed reduced to 8 knots. 1/3 of her crew were casualties. 6 gun mounts were destroyed or damaged. Commander Becton received damage reports from all departments. The situation was critical, but not hopeless. The forward guns still worked. Damage control teams were containing the fires. The ship stayed afloat despite massive damage. When Assistant Communications Officer Lieutenant Frank Manson asked if they should prepare to abandon ship, Becton's reply became legendary. "No, I'll never abandon ship as long as a single gun will fire." A nearby lookout added quietly, "And if I can find one man to fire it." 4 more kamikazes attacked in the next 20 minutes. The surviving gunners destroyed 3. The fourth, a Zero carrying a 550-pound bomb, crashed into the base of the forward stack. The explosion lifted the entire bridge structure before slamming it back down.
Every man in CIC was knocked unconscious for a moment. When they recovered, thick smoke filled the compartment. Radar scopes flickered and went out. For 3 critical minutes, Laffey was blind and silent. The 20th Kamikaze approached during this chaos, without radar warning or coordinated defense. Individual gun crews acted on their own. Gunners made first-class Robert Carr on Mount 44 spotted the Val diving from 8,000 feet. Even with the mount in manual mode, his crew kept tracking and firing continuously. The Val exploded 500 feet above the ship, showering debris across the forward. The 21st Kamikaze came from the stern, hidden in the smoke from Laffey's own fires. A Kate torpedo bomber flew at wave height, aiming for the forward magazine. Seaman Foutrides, still at his damaged 20mm mount, saw the plane come out of the smoke 400 yards away. He fired a long burst, walking the traces into the Kate's engine. The plane staggered, nose down, and crashed 30 yards from Laffey's port side. The explosion drenched the burning destroyer with seawater, helping to suppress the fires. The 22nd and final Kamikaze arrived at 09:47. By now, Laffey had been under non-stop attack for 80 minutes. The crew was exhausted, ammunition was low, and defensive firepower was reduced by 70%. But LCS L-51 had been fighting alongside Laffey the whole time. Lieutenant Charing ordered maximum speed and positioned his gunboat between the Kamikaze and the destroyer. The Val pilot had only seconds to choose, continued toward the valuable destroyer or accept the lesser target. He chose Laffey. The Kamikaze passed 50 feet over LCS L-51, its fixed landing gear almost hitting the gunboat's mast. Charing's gunners poured fire into the plane's belly. The Val began trailing smoke, then flame. It crashed into the sea 100 yards from Laffey. The battle was over. Laffey had survived 22 kamikaze attacks in 80 minutes, hit by 6 planes and 4 bombs. 32 killed, 71 wounded, but she stayed afloat. Her survival seemed impossible, but the math told the real story. Laffey's gunners had fired over 8,000 rounds. They destroyed 9 kamikazes with direct hits and damaged 4 more badly enough that they missed or crashed short. The fire control radar had kept tracking targets despite battle damage. Proximity fuses had multiplied defensive effectiveness. The Combat Information Center had coordinated the defense. Even when partially disabled, technology and training had won over sacrifice. The radar Picket system at Okinawa marked a major change in naval warfare. For the first time in history, electronic detection and fire control were more important than armor or speed. The destroyers stationed around Okinawa were not just scouts. They were command and control platforms, managing a 3-dimensional battle space that stretched 60 miles horizontally and 30,000 feet vertically. Fighter direction teams aboard the Picket destroyers changed air defense forever. During the Okinawa campaign, they controlled over 5,000 fighter interceptions, destroying about 1,900 enemy planes before they could reach attack positions. The radar could see what human eyes could not, and track what human minds could not process. Guided weapons could hit targets even in darkness, bad weather, and smoke. But the human cost was huge. During the 82-day Okinawa campaign, the radar Picket destroyers took the full fury of Japanese desperation. 15 destroyers and destroyer minesweepers were sunk while on radar Picket duty. 45 were damaged, and over 4,900 sailors were killed or wounded on the Picket stations alone. The destroyers had completed their mission as electronic sentinels and magnets for enemy attacks. They protected the main fleet by sacrificing themselves. On May 4th, kamikaze attacks sank destroyers Morrison and Luff at Radar Picket Station No. 1. Morrison went down in minutes after being hit by 4 planes in quick succession. 152 of her 331-man crew were lost. The destroyer's radar had tracked the incoming raids perfectly. Its guns had fired non-stop. Its fire control had been excellent. But when 40 planes attack a single destroyer, math becomes destiny. Captain Ricky Hei Inguchi, who had helped develop kamikaze tactics, wrote after the war about the radar picket battles. The American destroyers fought with incredible courage. Their radar gave them advantages we had not expected. They could see our planes forming up over our own airfields. They tracked us across hundreds of miles of ocean. Their fire control was deadly accurate. But Captain Inguchi also made an important point. We thought the radar pickets were weak because they were alone. We were wrong. The radar linked them to a defensive network that covered the whole fleet. When we attacked a single destroyer, we faced the coordinated defense of dozens of ships and hundreds of planes. The technology gap was impossible to overcome. Japanese pilots flying old planes with little training faced radar-directed guns firing proximity-fused shells. American fighter planes, guided by ship controllers, intercepted raids 50 miles from their targets. Electronic warfare had replaced visual combat. The psychological impact on Japanese operations was just as harsh. Pilots who expected to find scattered surprise targets instead ran into perfectly coordinated defenses. Radar operators in air-conditioned compartments tracked their planes from takeoff to impact. Fighter directors spoke calmly into radios, directing their destruction with mathematical precision. The age of the warrior had ended. The age of the technician had begun. By May 11th, Japanese naval commanders had changed their tactics in response to the
Radars removed blind spots in vertical coverage. Better IFF systems stopped friendly fire incidents. Data links between ships allowed coordinated defense of multiple stations. The technological advantage grew instead of shrinking. The destroyer Hugh W. Hadley at Picket Station 15 showed this new defensive power on May 11th. Under attack by over 150 kamikaze and conventional aircraft in multiple waves. Hadley CIC managed 6 separate radar plots at the same time while directing 12 cap fighters and coordinating gunfire with 3 supporting ships. The result? 23 enemy planes destroyed. Hadley was badly damaged but still afloat. 28 dead, 67 wounded. Without radar, the outcome would have been total destruction. Commander Melanie, Hadley's captain, later said, "Radar picket duty was like being the infantry pointman out front alone, the first to get hit. But unlike the infantry pointman, who could see only a few yards ahead, our radar gave us eagle eyes. We could see death coming from 50 miles away and get ready to meet it." The industrial effects were just as important. American shipyards were making over 200 new radar sets every month. Japanese plane production had fallen to fewer than 500 per month, mostly old designs. The math was unstoppable. American technology was advancing faster than Japanese. Pilots could be trained, but each destroyed kamikaze represented months of lost training that could not be replaced. Each damaged American destroyer returned to service with better equipment and experienced crews. The attrition war that Japanese commanders had expected to wear down American resolve instead showed American industrial power. On June 22, 1945, organized Japanese resistance on Okinawa ended. The radar picket stations had been operating for 90 days. During that time, they tracked thousands of air attacks, vectored fighters to intercept over 1,900 raids, and directly engaged about 600 kamikaze planes that reached attack positions. The strategic impact changed Pacific warfare. Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan, included massive radar picket lines based on what was learned at Okinawa. Hundreds of destroyers with the latest radar would form electronic barriers around the invasion fleets. Fighter direction would be centralized in specially built command ships. The Japanese homeland would face not just individual ship defenses, but integrated air defense networks stretching for hundreds of miles.
Admiral Mateo Gaki, commander of the 5th Air Fleet, made his final assessment before carrying out his own kamikaze attack on August 15, 1945. The American radar pickets have built an invisible wall around their forces. Our pilots crash against this wall like birds against glass. We see the target, but cannot reach it. Technology has defeated spirit. USS Laffey survived the war and served for another 30 years, eventually becoming a museum ship. Her radar arrays, though primitive by modern standards, represented a revolution in naval warfare. The ability to see beyond visual range, track multiple targets at once, and direct weapons with mathematical precision had changed combat forever. Commander Becton, reflecting on the radar picket experience, offered important insight. We proved at Okinawa that wars would no longer be won by the side with the bravest warriors or those most willing to sacrifice. Wars would be won by the side with the best technology and the industrial capacity to produce it in overwhelming quantities. The radar picket destroyers were not just ships, they were the embodiment of American technical superiority. The human cost had been terrible. Nearly 5,000 American naval personnel killed or wounded on radar picket duty alone. Nearly 2,000 kamikaze sorties flown, and hundreds of young Japanese pilots crashed into the sea, achieving nothing but their own deaths. But from this sacrifice came a new understanding of warfare. Electronic systems would decide future battles. Information superiority would become more important than firepower. The ability to process and act on data faster than an opponent would become the ultimate weapon. The radar picket destroyers had not just defended against kamikazes, they had shown the future of warfare. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, dozens of destroyers rest on the ocean floor alongside hundreds of Japanese aircraft, their crews honored by both sides for courage against impossible odds. But their sacrifice meant more than heroism. It marked the moment when technology became the main factor in warfare. The moment when radar operators in darkened combat information centers became more important than admirals on bridge wings. The moment when mathematical calculations replaced warrior intuition. The future belonged to nations capable of producing advanced electronics and training operators to use them effectively. The radar picket destroyers of Okinawa had not just won a battle, but they had revealed the nature of all future conflicts. The electronic battlefield would decide victory. The nation with superior sensors, processes, and data links would dominate. The age of electronic warfare had begun, written in the steel and blood of radar picket destroyers that stood between kamikazes and the American fleet.